So today I'm going to be reading an article from a magazine that I just subscribed to and that I love. I am not affiliated with them, nor am I sponsored by them. I just think the information is important and interesting, and so I'm going to read this article. It's called ADDitude magazine, and it's for people with ADHD. It's spelled ADDitude. And you can find more out about it on ADDitudemag.com. Again, I'm not sponsored or affiliated with this. It's just I love the information. I love the magazine, and it's very important information. The title of this article is "Could I Be Autistic Too? What Autism Looks Like in Women with ADHD and How to Fight Through the Misinformation of Society and the Medical Establishment." And this was written by Claire Barnett. It can be challenging to receive an accurate ADHD diagnosis as a female. The condition is traditionally thought of as a little boy's disorder, and doctors are less likely to pick up on the inattentive type symptoms that are more common among women with ADHD. But as difficult as it is for a woman to secure a legitimate ADHD diagnosis, it's equally challenging for an autistic woman to be officially diagnosed with ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder. The reasons why are similar to those at play with ADHD. Women are socialized to mask their autistic traits, and even when they don't succeed, autism is perceived by many as an exclusively male condition. The older an autistic woman gets without a formal diagnosis, the more likely clinicians are to be skeptical when she seeks an autism evaluation. They often hear, as I once did, that they seem, quote, too normal, or have had too much success to be autistic. These sentiments are born out of misinformation, which can affect the most qualified psychologist and scientist when it comes to women on the spectrum. The presentation of autism in adult women varies greatly from that of the young boys clinicians typically see. And since the current DSM-5 diagnostic criteria are based on studies of mostly boys and men, it is common for women with the same neurological variations to slip through the cracks. Women who are autistic and those diagnosed with ADHD can share executive functioning challenges, sensory processing differences, social difficulty, a higher rate of learning disorders and comorbid conditions, and a propensity for stimming. Stimming refers to movements or occasionally noises that a person makes in order to soothe her nervous system. These often repetitive actions self-stimulate the senses in a predictable way, and many people who stim do so instinctively or subconsciously to manage stress. To be diagnosed with ASD, the patient must have clinically significant difficulty with social interaction or communication, and unusually restricted or repetitive patterns of behavior or interests. In fact, many autistic people have a special interest, a topic or subject that they are heavily invested in and are more knowledgeable about than most. People with autism are also more likely to have sensory processing disorder, discomfort maintaining eye contact, and hyperlogical methods of thinking, with a tendency to be extremely literal. What women need to know about ASD. If you are a woman trying to determine whether you are autistic, here's what you need to know. It's important to evaluate your symptoms in light of your other diagnoses. For example, if you already have an ADHD diagnosis, your executive functioning difficulties can be attributed to that diagnosis. Thus, determining whether you could be autistic as well requires a closer look at symptoms related to social communication, need for routine, sensory differences, and logical/literal thinking. If you're a woman who has made it to adulthood without a diagnosis, your autism symptoms are likely masked to some degree by your gender socialization. Adults have learned to hide autistic traits that would typically prompt a diagnostic evaluation. When someone on the spectrum, intentionally or unintentionally, mimics other people's social behaviors, it is called social camouflage. Social camouflage is distinct from the traditional development of social skills because the individual has no intuitive understanding of why the social norm exists. Autistic people cover up their symptoms after experiencing negative social interactions, making the camouflage a reaction, not an instinct. It is essential to work with clinicians who have experience diagnosing autism in adults. It is especially helpful if they have knowledge of any existing diagnoses like ADHD and have previously evaluated or counseled other women. While the research on autism in women is sparse, first-hand experience can equip these clinicians to accurately assess the possibility of autism. ASD diagnosis in women. If you are seeking a diagnosis, prepare yourself to face skepticism, possibly even from your clinician. Unfortunately, anyone without a nuanced understanding of the spectrum may be doubtful of a seemingly, quote, normal adult female requesting an evaluation. The good news is that experienced, knowledgeable psychologists and psychiatrists do exist, and one of those individuals will take your concerns and questions seriously. He or she will likely evaluate you using a combination of diagnostic surveys and interviews with you and someone who knew you as a child. Generally, this is a parent, but it could be any person who observed you consistently before age 405. After your doctor gathers this information, it will inform your diagnosis. Accommodations and Treatment for ASD. There is no universally prescribed medicine for people on the autism spectrum. Prescription treatments more often address a comorbid condition such as anxiety, depression, ADHD, or seizures. However, almost all autistic people are encouraged to try cognitive behavioral therapy. This talk-based counseling can help autistic adults identify and process the ways they experience the world differently. A therapist can help an autistic patient develop an understanding of social rules or learn how to advocate for themselves in a work setting. It is important to note that an adult with autism can determine which new skills they want to learn and which personal differences they want to keep or change. By contrast, many young children placed in applied behavior analysis, ABA therapy, are trained to behave, quote, less autistic, while still too young to parse out how being on the spectrum affects their sense of self. Accommodations for people with autism include creating sensory-friendly spaces, clearly defined social rules, and neurodiversity-based autism education in the community. In a workplace, there might be the provision of a job mentor or the flexibility to work from home. If you're an adult female and suspect you may be on the autism spectrum, you are not alone. The medical establishment has been slow to develop an accurate profile of autism in women with low support needs. And as the knowledge emerges, it has been slow to make its way into the mainstream. Instead of calling an autistic person high-functioning or low-functioning, it is more accurate and respectful to describe her as having high, medium, or low support needs. Someone with high support needs likely requires very frequent assistance completing everyday tasks and is unlikely to be able to live independently. Someone with low support needs, what was once called Asperger's syndrome, likely requires fewer accommodations. You can decide to be evaluated at any point in your life. Receiving my diagnosis at age 19 improved my relationships with family and friends. I didn't become a different person, but afterward I can articulate my ways of thinking and perception. Even though we have a long way to go toward neurodiversity empowerment, I encourage potentially autistic women to explore the possibility. As our ranks grow, perhaps the world's understanding of us will grow as well. Claire Barnett is a neurodiversity advocate. She currently works at Vanderbilt University's First Center for Autism and Innovation as the Communications Coordinator. She is a 2023 MBA candidate at UNC Chapel Hill's Keenan Flagler School. Claire is proudly autistic and ADHD.